Hey y'all, welcome back to another adult movie review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Ghouls Rule from Monster High. For those of you who haven't been following along with this series, I never saw any of the original Gen 1 or Gen 2 Monster High media when I was younger, so I've been watching it for the first time as an adult and kind of reviewing the webisodes and the movies on the channel. And like I said, today we're going to be taking a look at Ghouls Rule. Sadly, this is another one that I didn't enjoy. That's been a big theme with these Monster High movies, is that I just don't typically love them. It's funny because even though that has been the pattern, Ghouls Rule kind of surprised me by how much I didn't like it. I don't know why going in I was like ready to really like this one, and it did just disappoint me. So that's the very short version of the review if that's what you wanted. I do feel badly that I'm not enjoying these movies just because I know so many of you guys have fond memories of watching them when you were younger. But watching them for the first time as an adult, I just keep seeing things in them that bother me, and like I keep analyzing them, and that's just how my brain works. Anytime I watch a movie or a show or read a book, any type of media I engage in, I can't help but be very analytical and kind of critical of it. Sometimes I wish that wasn't the case, but I can't change how my brain works. So yeah, this was just another one where I probably overthunk it. I don't think that's a word, but I probably just like was zeroed in too much on it, and I wasn't able to enjoy it because of that. But you know, it is what it is. I'm just doing my best out here. So yeah, we are going to be discussing in depth my opinions on Ghouls Rule today. The general is that they're kind of negative, but we will talk about why that is the case, obviously more in depth. Before we can then get into that, I always have to give my typical disclaimers, the first of which is that these are just my opinions. If you guys disagree with me, that is totally chill, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this movie in the comments down below. And then I will also be talking in full detail and with full spoilers about Ghouls Rule. It's just a lot easier for me to do these videos if I I'm under the assumption that you guys know what I'm talking about and what I'm referencing. So if you haven't seen it yet, pause the video, go watch Ghouls Rule really quick. It's like an hour long, it's not that bad. And then come back and we can talk about it together so we are all on the same page. And then as per usual, if you do find yourself enjoying the video, if you could give it a like, that's super helpful to me. And if you're new here and you enjoy your time, definitely subscribe so you can see more. But with that out of the way, we can get into my actual thoughts here. Now this is normally where I would break and I would put the video in nice neat little sections, because usually there's certain themes in a movie, or there's like a common thread through a bunch of things that I did or did not like in the movie. And that is still kind of the case with Ghouls Rule, but my main problem is that the movie itself felt so wildly disorganized and just all over the place, and honestly almost unfinished, that I'm having a hard time because of that organizing my thoughts. So this is going to be a little bit more conversational, a little bit more stream of consciousness. I hope y'all are okay with that, but I sat down and I really did try to organize my thoughts, and it was just chaos. So this is what we're doing instead. If I had to break down my thoughts about Ghouls Rule into one sentence, it would be this. It is a movie that could be a really great film with a good metaphor about police brutality and stereotyping if it were executed in literally any other way than the way in which it was executed. My main complaint, and this is a complaint that I have with so many of the Monster High movies, it is getting extremely frustrating at this point, but it's that the foundation is just so shaky. It's almost not even there. Like, if you want to build a house, you're going to build it on a solid foundation, right? Like, you want it to be a well-poured cement, you want it to be level and even. If that's what I wanted from this plot line, what I got was 2 toothpicks and a good luck sign. And I didn't have very good luck. The very basic idea of Ghouls Rule is that Halloween is a movie that's a scary time for monsters, because it's a time when humans are more aggressive towards them. It's kind of a holiday where humans will try to trick monsters or trap them or pull pranks on them. So it's not a good holiday for monsters, which brings up the very first question, literally the most basic concept in this movie, and I'm already what do you mean? Why is it that this aggression only comes out on Halloween? Or if it is year-round, why is it so much worse on Halloween? Why is there a whole holiday dedicated towards how much humans don't get along with monsters? A big reason this was confusing for me is that the town of New Salem, which is inhabited by humans, is right next to Monster High. It is right there. Everyone knows that it's there. You can literally see Monster High from the skyline of New Salem. So it's no secret that these humans are living very close to monsters. They know that they're there. They could very easily get there, and they do in this movie. So with that being the case, if they have enough hatred to have a holiday for their hatred, why are they not just going after this school full time? Why are they letting it sit there peacefully 364 days a year? But on that 365th day, my goodness, we are going to destroy it. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's not logical, I guess. In the movie, we see that Frankie learns that Halloween actually started off as kind of a celebration between monster and human relations, and how the fact that monsters all have unique powers is really helpful to humans because, like, they can help them out. It actually really reminded me of the watered down and overly cheerful version of, like, the Thanksgiving story that kids in the US are taught in school. That's an anecdote. Like, that's really the only way that those two things seem similar to me. I don't think that that's, like, thematic to the story, but I kind of just wanted to mention it. But that leads me to question number 2, which is, if Halloween started off as a holiday that celebrated monsters and humans, like, living in harmony, how did we get where we are today? How did we get to this holiday of aggression? I don't know if there was a particular event that caused the flip, like if there was one holiday or Halloween that was really, really bad, and so humans became very aggressive, or if it was something that kind of happened over time and the relationship just slowly decayed. But either way, I feel like I deserve an answer, right? Like, these seem like basic and very important questions to the world building in this movie, and we just never get answers, which is so funny because, again, that's something that I've had a problem with most of the Monster High movies I've seen so far, is that there's just really glaring plot holes, in my opinion, and normally I just kind of accept that and I can go with it. This movie, it was so big, like, it seemed like there was such a big gap in my understanding that I kept waiting for it to be explained. Instead of being like, yeah, no, this is a Monster High movie, I'm probably not going to get an explanation, I kept waiting to get my answer, and I never got it, and it was so incredibly frustrating because it seems like something that's very necessary to the story. The lack of a solid background and, like, understanding of what was going on in this movie made what should have been a pretty serious message and, like, a pretty serious movie feel unimportant. The movie is about monsters being persecuted by humans, and the persecution of a group of people is always important and something that should be discussed, but the way that it's handled and just the lack of explanation and the fact that there's so many other things happening made it feel like I couldn't pay attention. Like, I was so busy trying to figure out what in the world was going on with this world that I'm, like, supposed to be invested in, that I couldn't be paying attention to the actual issues at hand. And I think it makes it even worse because the characters within the story react to those issues in a very serious way, but also in, like, the worst way possible, so that it made these serious issues feel unserious to me. For example, Holt is framed for spray painting the Monster High logo on the human high school. Yeah, I do know that that's technically a crime. It is vandalism, and the police are the bad guys in this film, so, like, it makes sense that they would be going after Holt and, like, trying to punish him for this. But everyone else is also very upset about this in the human realm. Like, all of the high schoolers are very easily riled up by the fact that this vandalism happened. Now, to be fair, I could be viewing this just through the wrong lens, because I could not have cared less if something like this had happened at my high school. I had absolutely zero school spirit. I wouldn't have batted an eye if I found out that another school had graffitied ours. So maybe I'm just the wrong person watching, and definitely let me know in the comments if you guys had more of that school spirit and, like, you would have been angry if this happened to your high school. Because for me, I was watching this like, why does anyone care? Like, it's spray paint, it is gonna come off, like, you know, someone wash it off. It's gonna take some effort, but, like, it doesn't really matter, you know? At least that was the viewpoint that I had. So I do understand that maybe I'm a little bit biased in that way, but everyone in the movie who cares just way too much. When Headmistress Bloodgood finds out about the vandalism, still thinking that it was Holt who committed the vandalism, she said a line that, like, literally made me want to pull my hair out, and I'm trying to grow my hair out, okay? Like, I want long hair, and I was ready to pull it out for this, because she said, and I quote, "The vandalism set monster and normie relations back 100 years. If a little bit of graffiti on a high school is going to set the relations back 100 years, the relations were essentially non-existent to start with. Like, if that's how fragile things are, there's no relationship. Like, you can't even call that a relationship at that point. And it brings me back to the idea of, if the relationship is so fragile that graffiti undoes 100 years of progress, why are the humans not attacking the monsters literally year-round? I know I'm just repeating myself, but, like, they're setting it up to be something that is so serious. Like, the graffiti is such an affront to these humans that they are willing to do so many terrible things, which I'm going to get to in a second. And yet they want us to believe that, like, again, 364 days of the year, these two basically societies can coexist. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And when I say that it gets worse, by the like climax of the movie, New Salem literally turns into an angry mob with like torches and pitchforks, the whole 9 yards, and the police set out to basically torture Holt for his crime. I think that torture is actually the lightest way that you can interpret what was going to happen. They might have been trying to kill him. It's kind of unclear because like it's a kid's movie, but it wasn't looking good for him. And it's like, that's all over some graffiti. Are you serious? Like, the reaction is so overblown and so ridiculous that it made it difficult for me to feel like I should care about what's happening because it was just so ludicrous to watch. This really ties into what I said before about the fact that this movie could be a good metaphor. I can't speak to what it's like in other countries. Obviously, like, I was born and raised in America. I've never been anywhere else, let alone lived anywhere else. But in America, the legal system is like, not necessarily super. You are more likely to be arrested and do more time for, say, a drug crime than committing a sexual assault. And if you are a member of a minority, whether that is your like gender identity or your sexuality or especially your race, you are more likely to have like a harsher punishment for the same crime than someone who is cis hetero and white. So like, I do think that the cops in Ghouls Rule wanting to completely overpunish Holt for committing a crime because he was a monster committing the crime could be a really good metaphor for the very real issues that we experience here in America. I think that that was a good premise, and I do almost think that that's kind of what the writers were trying to set up, because the cops are the bad guys in the film. Like, it's right there. It's like an easy thing to see. But because everything around this was just so shoddily set up, there's so many holes, I don't understand what's going on, the background is so lackluster, and there's a lot of other things distracting me from what I should be focusing on, the metaphor falls really flat, and I think that's a terrible thing to say because it's a really serious issue, but it just didn't feel like anything. Like, it just felt silly, and that's not at all how I would describe that issue in real life. I understand that it's a kid's movie, and so it can be hard to, like, toe the line between being appropriate for kids and tackling these really serious issues, but I also think that Monster High has done that pretty successfully in the past. Fright On, I think, did pretty good at handling race issues. Not necessarily perfect, but, like, way better than this movie. And so it's just frustrating because it's something that you can see is possible within Monster High, and it just did not happen in this movie. Now, you might have heard me mention a few times now talking about the fact that there's so much going on. That's kind of my other big issue, is that there are too many subplots in this film. First of all, we have a deal with like Cleo and Deuce and her family because they don't like Deuce and like how he influences Cleo. Then we have some drama with Heath and Abby and like their kind of romance that's burgeoning, I guess you could say that. Then we have the whole thing with Jackson and Holt because, you know, they are two people inhabiting the same body who are kind of in this push-pull thing with the human world and then the monster world. And then lastly, we have a deal with Claudine and Draculaura, where Draculaura is trying to set Claudine up on a date, and she is not at all interested. Those are all very interesting things, and because of how poorly the main plot was executed, they actually all are way more interesting to me than the main plot, which is super bad. But the issue is that for a movie with a 1 hour runtime, 4 subplots is 3 subplots too many. Like, there simply isn't time to do justice to anything on screen if you're trying to tie in all of these various threads. Like, it's just too much going on. So, to address everything kind of individually, starting off with Cleo and Deuce, the whole thing is that Pharaoh and Nephra are trying to, like, influence Cleo to leave Deuce, and they want her to lead her life a certain way. And I think this is a good subplot to have in the sense that I think it's very relatable. I'm sure a lot of people could relate to the idea of your family trying to control your life choices and, like, the trajectory of your life, especially if you are a younger person watching this. And I'm also sure that a lot of people could relate to the idea of your family not approving of your romantic interests, for better or for worse. So, like, this is a relatable subplot. It's an interesting subplot. It's a good one. It also does kind of get a resolution by the end, because in the middle of the movie, Cleo breaks up with Deuce, and then by the end they get back together and she stands up to her family, which is all great. I think it could use a little bit of pacing adjustment, but, like, overall a pretty solid subplot. But the movie just doesn't have time for it. It doesn't have the time to dedicate to it in a good way. And the time that they did put towards the subplot took away from the time they could have been investing in, you know, enhancing the main plot and fleshing out the details with that. Also, I could be totally wrong because I haven't seen Boo York yet. I've just, like, heard about it. But I'm pretty sure this is, like, very similar to something that happens in Boo York. Definitely correct me if I'm wrong. So, like, I could be complaining for nothing. But if it is, I kind of think it's interesting that they would end up in the future reusing this through line in, like, a very similar way. I don't know, I just thought that it was kind of weird. Then we have Abby and Heath, and their whole thing is that Heath is very clearly in some way attracted to Abby, but he still has like a very stereotypically gendered mindset, and so he's extremely intimidated and almost offended by the fact that Abby is a super strong and independent woman, and like, she definitely doesn't need him. She might want to be around him, but she certainly doesn't need him. This is, again, something that I think is interesting. I feel like it could be cool to explore Heath kind of getting over his stereotypes that he has in his head and learning to be comfortable with having a very strong girlfriend if, you know, they officially get together. It's very iffy at this point in time. I don't know if in a future movie they end up firmly together, but they're kind of just flirtatious here. Anyway, though, that's not the point. The point is, this is something that could be very, very interesting, but this is probably the least fleshed out subplot of the entire movie, and it's just, it should have been cut. That's like the easiest way that I can say it. That's not to say that I don't want to see these two characters on screen or that I don't want to see them interacting on screen. I just don't think this movie was the right place to do it. Then as for Jackson and Holt, this is the one that I think should have stayed in. Like, I feel like this movie should have had the main plot and one subplot, and this is the one that they should have kept in because it ties in the most to the main plot. There's a lot of talk about the relationship between monsters and humans within Ghouls Rule, and so the fact that Jackson and Holt, again, same body, different people, both inhabiting the human world and the monster world. It's a perfect tie-in and it works really, really well. I think the idea that they both fit into the human world and fit into the monster world and simultaneously don't fit into either is really interesting, and I'm sure it's very frustrating for them as characters, and that's something that I'm glad we got a little bit of a chance to explore in Ghouls Rule. But I just wish there was more, you know, like if we cut out the other three subplots, we could have fleshed out the main plot a lot better. We could have established the background of like why Halloween is this weird holiday, and we could have paid more attention to Jackson and Holt because they bring a lot to the table. There's so much potential there. But I feel like this movie barely tapped the potential that they had. And that finally brings us to Claudine and Draculaura. So as I said, this subplot is about the fact that Draculaura wants to set Claudine up on a date, and Claudine is very, very hesitant and like cagey about it, and actually very angry about the fact that Draculaura wants to do this throughout the movie. I was interested in this because I know it's a very common fan theory that Claudine is a lesbian, and so I knew that she wasn't like going to be shown as a lesbian within the movie, but I figured this kind of tied into that idea, so I was interested in how they would handle it. And in the end, the resolution is just that she was super nervous because she'd never been on a date before, so she was just kind of lashing out, which is a valid reason. Like, I'm not trying to say that no one can feel nervous and kind of have that reaction, but the pacing was super off with this subplot. You spend 90% of the movie establishing it, and then it's like 3 lines at the end where Claudine apologizes for being weird and says that she was nervous. Like, it's just not executed well. It just is something that really bothered me. The whole subplot feels unfinished and rushed, and honestly, I just wish that the producers or whoever made the decision would have just been brave enough to let Claudine be a lesbian, because I think that would have been much more interesting to see and like made her character grow a lot more rather than shoehorning in a "I was nervous" line at the end. And even again, if you don't want to go that route, giving more time to the idea that she's nervous would flesh out her character more than like the 2 minutes at the end that we get to see this. It was very, very rushed. If I seem like I'm going through these kind of quickly, or that I seem a little exasperated and tired, it's because I am. I think that due to the fact that I just naturally analyze and critique media, a lot of time that's actually how I have fun with media. Even though it might seem like I'm being really negative, it's super fun for me to be able to analyze something. And so there are some movies, even within the Monster High franchise, that I can watch, and they might be bad in a fun way, because I get to critique it, or they might be good with little bits that I can analyze, and that's fun for me. But Ghouls Rule was bad in like a distinctly unfun way, and so I just kind of feel tired. There were a couple of good things though. Abby was a treat to have on screen as always. She's like the saving grace for a lot of these movies. And then as I mentioned, I really enjoyed the idea of Jackson and Holt. I think it could have been better fleshed out, but I do think that the bones that we got were really, really interesting. I also have to say, I think that from the media that I've seen thus far, Jackson and Holt were mostly featured in the webisodes, and I hated them in the webisodes. I'm very sorry to any Jackson and Holt fans. I just found them both really irritating in very different ways, but this movie really made me rethink that and see their characters in a different light. It made them much more endearing to me, which was really cool to get to experience. And there also was the ending scene that I thought was really good. At the end of the movie, the police still want to arrest a bunch of the monsters for their crimes, I guess, and all of the humans kind of stand up with them and have a moment of solidarity, and they're like, no, if you're going to arrest them, you have to arrest us too. And I thought that was a very touching moment. There was some actual genuine emotion there. By far, I think, at least for me, that was the best scene in the movie. So like, it didn't make up for all the bad that came before it, but I was happy that we at least got to end on a good note there. Overall, if my ranting here hasn't been enough for you, I think the best way that I can sum up how bad I felt that Ghouls Rule was that I didn't want to finish it. Through my journey of the Monster High media, I started with the webisodes, couldn't finish them because I was having such a miserable time, but then I finished every other movie, even when I was like not having a good time, I managed to finish them all. This one, I wanted to stop 20 minutes in. Like, I was sick and tired of what I was seeing on screen within 20 out of the 60 minutes that I had to get through, and it was genuinely a struggle, which I think is a very sad testament to how bad I thought it was. But in an effort to be nice, I will say that I think Ghouls Rule was bad in a very innocent way. I don't think that the poor quality of the movie made light of the issues of stereotyping and mob mentality and police brutality. So that's like a low bar, but I'm glad that we were able to like get over that at least with this movie. I do think some other ones, like Escape from Skull Shores, had elements that were very questionable, that were handled in a bad way, that seemed to me like it could be actively harmful. So at the very least, Ghouls Rule I didn't think was good, but it was bad in a very mundane way. So on that jolly note, that's the video. Those are all of my thoughts. Despite the fact that I didn't want to finish this movie, I am going to keep going on. Like, I'm going to keep watching all of these. I powered through this one, so now I'm like, I'm going to power through all of the rest of them. I keep thinking that there has to be at least one Monster High movie that I really actively enjoy, and so I just keep telling myself that the next one is going to be that. So only time will tell if that ends up being true. The next movie on my list to watch is Scarus, so definitely be on the lookout for that video. I'm going to try to build up some excitement for that video because like I really want to like one, and I'm hoping that this is going to be the one that we end up liking. But yeah, like I said earlier, I would love to hear your thoughts on Ghouls Rule. I know I was pretty hard on it, and I'm sorry if you liked it. You're totally allowed to like it. I just really wasn't a fan, so I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But that is going to be it for today, regardless of your thoughts on the movie. I hope you were able to enjoy my little rant-filled video here. As always, I do have linked in my description my Amazon wishlist and then my Instagram and TikTok, so if you want to support me in other ways, you can definitely check those things out. Otherwise, I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys!